Watching The Night of Seven Kingdoms has been an absolute treat. The only reason why I started watching the TV show is because I finished Castlevania and I was out of options. So I went into this without any expectations, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed the lightheartedness of this show. The script is true to the book, and it is refreshing to see that after the absolute letdown of House of the Dragon Season 2 and the last two seasons of Game of Thrones. And this is not just my opinion, by the way, it is the general opinion. The show A Night of Seven Kingdoms is redeeming the franchise in a way no one expected. But what I personally loved about the show was that I get to see more Targaryens. I can't get enough of these incestuous aliens. In Game of Thrones, the Targaryens are like a myth. We hear about them for the first time when Robert Baratheon is talking about the Targaryens. And as much as he hates them, you can't help but sense how scared he is of the Targaryens and of the Targaryens ever really coming back, properly ruling the Seven Kingdoms again. And if Robert Baratheon is scared of Rhaegar's memory, a dragonless Targaryen prince, that he defeated, by the way, then you can't help but wonder how powerful the Dragon Lords were. You get to meet Daenerys, who is the very definition of strength because you see her wearing the Dothraki braids and she dabbles in magic and prophecy like a true Valyrian. It is a full circle moment for the descendant of slave masters to use dragons to end slavery. You already know how great the story is, and you also know how it's going to end. So it makes you wonder how it started. In House of the Dragon, you get to see the privileged Targaryens, okay? You see exactly the kind of hubris and entitlement that would not only allow something like the Dance of the Dragons to happen, but to invite the extinction of the dragons. This is the part of the story where the idea of madness is no longer a myth or projection. You realize maybe Robert was right about the Targaryens and their power. You still think that they are powerful and they have authority, but is it legitimate? When you see the dragons die out, which to be honest, we haven't really seen that yet, and we've just seen Rhaenys and Meleys die, and it's hard for me to even rewatch those episodes. When you watch House of the Dragon, you realize the dragons were the source of Targaryen power. When you see Targaryens without their dragons, still ruling Westeros, but in a state of limbo, where magic has not been there for some time now, it has died out, but the Targaryens are still there. They're still living among regular people, and they have a hard time pretending to be regular people. This family is not okay. They're not convincing anyone. That very scene where you meet Aryan, Baelor, and Maekar for the first time, you can feel how diminished they are, and every character is diminished in its own way. Aryan's disproportionate sense of self is nothing more than overcompensation. Of course, he thinks he's a dragon in human form. He struggles to have the self-esteem to just be human in human form. This is exactly the kind of prickly attitude you would get from a 16-year-old who's not just battling the general feeling of inadequacy, he's also expected to act normal in a world where something as special as dragons died out because of his family. With Maekar, there is a similar inadequacy. He's frustrated about his kids going missing, but there's more to it. He doesn't like that he has to be in Ashford to begin with. Attending a mediocre tourney to make nice with people he obviously doesn't care about, it's diminishing. It makes even more sense when you realize that this man has had to fight off a rebellion from a faction of his own family to maintain the power and legitimacy of the Targaryen dynasty. And for what? So he can be in Ashford attending tourneys for teenagers he doesn't give two shits about. The underlying theme of the Targaryen name diminishing as the years go by, but the pressure to uphold it increasing, spin-off. You almost understand why the Targaryens went mad. They weren't mad in the traditional sense. They were once overconfident. And then the madness that Robert Baratheon remembers is just them breaking under the pressure of pretending to be the strongest, most powerful family in Westeros. But the only reason why they think that is because of this memory of dragons associated with them. And it's what made them special all this time. What made them special is now long gone. You could argue that the dragons didn't just give them power, they also gave them purpose. And without that, they're all suicidal or homicidal at the very least. That brings us to Baelor. Listen, I love me some Baelor Targaryen, okay? You don't need to convince me that he was great and honorable. I would go so far as to say that he's basically the male version of Rhaenys. Baelor makes something very evident. There is another element to the Targaryen madness, and that is absolute disregard for human life. Not everybody else's life, their own life, especially when it feels mediocre. Now, at this point, I'm sure you have all watched episode 5 and you know what happens. Baelor gets his head smashed in by Maekar, and it's not on purpose, it's just an accident. But he dies, and the way that he dies reminds me so much of Dany, okay? She dies in Jon's arms, just like Baelor dies, and she got on her dragon, took the other two beyond the wall to fight the White Walkers and rescue Jon. Why? Because she believed on some level that Jon was telling the truth. She risked her own life to protect him. She lost a dragon. Yes, she didn't die. She died later on when he turned on her and killed her, which is bad writing. We all see it. But there is a certain poetic significance in this scene. Baelor also risks his own life, not necessarily thinking that he will die, but at least, on some level, he knows that he could get hurt. And why? Because he believes in Dunk's innocence. He risks not his life at first. He risks his position and prestige to fight for a hedge knight. And he knows no matter how low the stakes are, there is a battle and anyone can get hurt in a battle. So he is risking his safety and well-being for Dunk because he believes Dunk is innocent. The same way that Dany believed that Jon was telling the truth. And this tendency to do something dangerous because you believe someone is a very Targaryen thing to do. We've also seen Rhaenys do it. We've seen Rhaenyra do it when she went to confront her uncle Daemon. And while she's aware that Daemon cares for her, that's not what everyone else believes. And she also knows that Daemon is in a full-on rebellion against her father, whom he also loves. So who's to say that he wouldn't hurt a kid if he felt challenged? Daemon himself risked his life when he was trying to crush the Triarchy. And then again, he risks his life again when he's fighting Aemond and Rhaegar. The Targaryens, no matter how powerful they are, know that they can die. They know that their dragons can die, but they don't necessarily care. There's no value in living if the life in question is one of mediocrity. They're ready to risk their lives. They have this need to prove that they are powerful and strong. And if they cannot do that, that in that stagnancy, that's when the madness comes up. Now, a lot of people believe that Baelor is honorable, and him risking his life for Dunk is something that makes him a Stark almost. And listen, I need you to reconsider. The Starks are a completely different breed, and I don't think that is relevant here. Baelor is a strategic man. He's next in line, and for the majority of his life, he has served the crown. He served the crown not with dragons, but with intellect. He's also a man who reads a lot and studies his opponents. So is it really honor that drove him to fight for Dunk? Or is it the ability to understand that the Targaryens are in a much worse position than they think? Aerion acting like a brat, twice by the way, in one tourney, could be the nail in their coffin. Baelor fighting for Dunk is not just kindness. He sees that the only reason why Dunk intervened is because of Egg. So really, it is one Targaryen fighting another Targaryen. And Dunk is just getting mixed up in all of this. He knows that Arion's dragon in human form madness is cringe to say the least. But attacking defenseless women because of that is exactly the kind of thing that would destroy the Targaryen reputation even further. to a point where they would have to do even more than attend minor tourneys at Ashford. Like they would have to lower themselves even more. Their family is already debasing themselves, and the Targaryen kids using common folk as pawns in their games is the kind of stain that would be harder to remove without, dragons, and also this impending possibility of another Blackfire rebellion just around the corner. I think that Baelor believes that Aerion has no chance of defeating Dunk. Okay. There's no way that he's going to come out of this, especially when there's like 7 people involved. He also knows that Dunk is innocent, and the way that he sees him, there's a lot of other people who see him just like that. People are not exactly on Arion's side. So there is no way, there's no honorable way to spin this. The Targaryen family reputation is not going to come out of this intact. You could also say that someone who actually was there, for the very first Blackfire Rebellion would understand that these family rivalries, they don't start on the battlefield. They're finished on the battlefield, but they start in childhood, and they get worse over time because there's always this incompetent parent whose job is to de-escalate the conflict, but instead what they do is they make it worse because they're not protecting their kids from each other. He saw the real problem. That was Egg and Arian trying to kill each other. He knows how bad this is. They should be each other's support system. Instead, he sees that Dunk is more of a brother to Egg than Arian or Daeron. And this is exactly why he participates in the trial. He can sense that this is it. This is the next Targaryen civil war, and it's brewing in his own family. And he's the hand of the king, so this is exactly the kind of thing that he has to pay attention to. He takes Dunk's side not out of honor, or at least not entirely. He knows that Dunk is going to win. He needs to ensure that when he does, it is remembered as a Targaryen victory, not a victory against the Targaryens. And how is he going to do that? By making sure that a Targaryen comes to his defense. When Aerion fails, which is obvious, I mean, we all saw it coming, he wouldn't be able to tarnish the Targaryen name any further. Why? Because on the opposing side is the Crown Prince Bealor. Remember, incestuous aliens. What Bealor did was crisis PR. Honestly, in episode 6, the character of Lionel Baratheon, you can actually hear him say, "Oh, your prince did not risk anything. He was fighting his king's guard and his family." If things had gone according to Baelor's plan, he knew that Dunk would win, and the victory would be credited to the Targaryen name, irrespective of Arion's actions. And the family name and reputation would not be tarnished by this. No one would think that they can challenge a Targaryen, but they would also not assume that the Targaryens are illegitimate, because the reason why Dunk won is because a Targaryen participated in the trial of the 7 on his side. Baelor's actions protected the family and delayed the rebellion for a couple more generations. And yes, he was risking his life, but I don't think he was too concerned about the life in question. Why? Because while he isn't showing the same disregard for the tourney and the environment the same way that Makar is, he definitely feels it. You can hear it in his own words when he says, "Oh, I will not be the king, not for many years, I pray." He doesn't see the throne or being the king as some kind of achievement or as particularly fulfilling. Why? Because the Targaryens are not ruling in the same way they used to. Their rule has been diminished, and it has lost its allure or its value. You can almost tell that maybe Robert executed the rebellion, but he did not start it. The Targaryens are in a very strange place right now. People like Baelor are more inclined to take risks because deep down they know that if they keep on living, it's not necessarily worth it. This nihilistic tendency is very common. The Targaryens don't do well in mediocrity, okay? They want greatness, they want power, and they are magical beings living in a world that has lost magic. If they don't get it, some of them, sure, will act insane, they will hurt people, but the others, they're just devoid of the will to live. You can see that in Daron. I mean, he's not hurting people but he's hurting himself by drinking himself into oblivion. And Baelor, is he really honorable, or is he also trying to end his life because he's sick of it? I honestly believe that the Targaryens lack purpose and direction without their dragons. And I think that this was a contributing factor. I don't think it was the only reason for Baelor to support Dunk. I mean, he's a great guy. He probably just wanted to. But I also think that it is one of the reasons for, I guess, taking a risk. Do you think that it was a PR tactic to protect the family's reputation and prevent future rebellions, and it just happened to backfire and cost him his life? Let's talk about it in the comments. I'm curious about what you guys think.